The ABC made his book God's Earth on religion and ecology into a major TV documentary. He is also an SPA patron. Please welcome Paul Collins.
I'm very glad that this conference was on in the last week of Lent, because I've been doing penance for the last day and a half, listening to what seemingly looks like a very, very bleak picture. And I suspect that some of you have been doing penance as well. I had an even bigger penance having to listen to George Browning. Sorry, George, I had to get that back on you. We are actually good mates. Well, the last time I met him at the airport, he asked me why I was so cruel to him on air. It has been quite a penitential exercise, and when, like George, we're, I suppose, trying to lift the spirits a little bit, lift your spirits at any rate, and my topic is the planet comes first, the new moral absolute, it looks like it's even more difficult, because we seem to live in a world that is absolutely besotted with itself. I mean, you go down to bookshops these days and all the books that sell well, and I'm a jaundiced author coming up for book number 11, and when you're a popular author trying to make a few bucks out of writing, you're very jaundiced with other successful authors who you hate. And all of the books that are doing well at the present moment are by people with troubled pasts, or how I conquered this, that, or the other addiction, or even though they didn't love me, how I came to love my mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, cousin, or whoever, or how I was in therapy for a decade, or to read the blurb of a book recently featured on Radio National's Life Matters, and this is the blurb: at the age of 42, with the wreckage of a dozen broken relationships smoking behind him, the author, whom I'll leave unnamed, was single again. That this time he decided to stop and take stock and to take charge. With unflinching honesty, he examined his relationships, affairs, family history, and struggle with a secret disorder, and looked at the desire for intimacy and peace with the past. No man has ever written so honestly. Excuse me. I mean, we are a culture besotted with ourselves, and the helping professions have expanded exponentially to meet our seemingly endless psychological needs and hurts. We live in an age of rampant individualism, with people spending most of their lives discovering themselves. And in fact, discovering oneself has become something of a substitute for actually living. So the evidence in the bookshops seems to point to the fact that we live in a culture addicted to the self. And in fact, as a bit of a historian in my background, people in the past would be absolutely gobsmacked at this level of self-indulgence and self-obsession. As another Berry, George quoted Wendell Berry, I'm quoting Thomas Berry. Thomas Berry, a very creative thinker, talks about the pathos of the human besotting our culture. And there is some truth to that. There is a real sense in which we have lost, or many people in our culture have lost, all points of external reference. So it makes it difficult then to come to say to a culture like that you've got to shift from an anthropocentric ethic, an ethic that focuses purely on the human, to one that is biocentric, or if you like, cosmocentric. Yet that's what I'm saying in this talk this afternoon. Now, George mentioned imagination, and it is fascinating that he did so, because I too think that exactly what we're dealing with is a problem of imagination. I thought that, for me at any rate, that one of the talks that I really enjoyed at this conference was Bill Ryerson's talk from the United States. And he showed, it seemed to me conclusively, that we change the way people view reality, not by appealing to their minds, but by appealing to their imaginations and to their emotions. That's how you bring about a real change in behaviour. I recalled, when I was thinking of that, recalled what Mal Washer said yesterday, when Mal was saying, you know, the intellectual knowledge and about the state of the Murray-Darling is overwhelming. We know that the Murray-Darling is in disaster state. We know that irrigation is part of the cause of that. We know that cotton and rice growing are destructive on the driest continent on earth. We've known it since Keith Hancock, the economic historian, talked about it in the 1950s and the 1960s. I can still remember as a young almost middle-aged PhD student, it seems 40 seems young now, at the ANU, listening to a retired Sir Keith Hancock talking about the insanity of irrigation in Australia. We've got all that evidence, it's all there, it's staring us in the face, but it changes nothing because intellectual conviction, if I've learned something at endless SPA conferences, it is that intellectual convictions don't necessarily change anything except for scientists and intellectuals. Bill Ryerson, spot on. The way you change attitudes is via imagination and emotion, exactly as George said. Now, simply put, imagination is the ability to conceive of and to give expression to new images and to their concomitant ideas. It's the ability of being able to think of something different. I once saw a wonderful definition of madness by a man named William Lynch in a book, Discovering Hope, a wonderful book. And Lynch says that paranoia, madness, is a complete lack of imagination. It is a complete inability to be able to conceive of reality in a different way. And there's a real sense, I think, in our culture in which we find it very, very difficult to conceive of reality differently, to grasp another possibility, to perceive another angle on something, to make a connection that is not obvious, to discover a pattern, to discover the ability to give form and to create order. One of the most vivid illustrations of that, of course, is evolution. In a way, what Darwin does is he simply creates a way of viewing the enormously complex reality that we have come to discover through geology and through our knowledge of the history of the cosmos. What the scientific theory does is give form and order to complex realities so that our minds can understand them. It is an exercise of the imagination. But part of the difficulty that we have in our culture is that, we've already got commissars of taste and language. We determine what you can think and what you can't think. We determine what you can say and what you can't say, so that so much of what we hear in contemporary discourse is second-hand, derivative and stale. And the reason for that is because so often people are not allowed to think outside the square. And yet the only thing that will help us is thinking outside the square. So how then do we appeal, and I'm not speaking here of people in developing countries because I'm not addressing them. I know little or nothing, I mean only what I'm constantly told about them. I've never worked outside Australia except for a brief period in Papua New Guinea. So I'm trying to address how we do something in our culture to change people. How do we find a way of appealing to the imagination of people who still are reading all those besotted with self books? How do we help them to see the world differently?